Thank you.
Boosters. Only install one.
Okay.
Hello, hello. How are you guys doing today?
Pretty good. How are you?
Fantastic.
How you doing, Kiki?
I'm good. I'm good.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Just waiting for our guests to come back. There. So, I know we have some new people on our platform. So, just to let you guys know, hello and welcome back to Let's Be Real. I am your host,
Whoa,
Danielle
whoa, whoa! It's
George.
just a pop up though. We're not back yet.
Yes, we're not back yet, but it's good to see you guys virtually. That's for sure.
For real. And you know what's funny, man? I've been getting hit up, being asked like, "Yo, when y'all gonna be on?" And that made me feel
Yeah.
nice.
I've had a few people ask me
Yeah.
as well.
Can
So,
can I get back to the intro, guys?
Oh my
oh,
bad.
oh,
Sorry.
sorry,
Sorry.
sorry about that.
I'm your host, Danielle George, alongside Mr. Noel and Kiki. I'm so glad to be back. I don't know about you guys. I'm so glad to be back.
It's
Even though
nice.
it's a pop-up, it's a quick thing, but I'm excited.
It's
So on
it's a
that note,
pleasant pop up.
Mr. Noel, do you want to introduce our guest?
So Dr. Rena LaFrance, friend of mine, um, psychiatrist, and very knowledgeable on all kinds of mental health, physical health topics. She has um, thankfully agreed to be here today to talk about the COVID vaccine. And so, just everybody, if you're on, please just say hi and let us all know where you're at, and join us in saying thank you to Dr. LaFrance for being here tonight. Sorry, I got a fly that just buzzed. But yeah, so we're having this pop up because um, there's a lot of in our communities and some communities, especially among visible minorities, especially Black people, Indigenous people, that have a certain. Actually, there's a lot of different groups that have a certain angst towards and mistrust towards the COVID vaccine. I haven't really seen anything that's gone on in recent years that has had this much um, conspiracy and
Controversy.
controversy and a lack of parity in the response. Like
Hmm.
everybody has their own ideas about it,
Yes.
and so we were asked to use our platform to talk about it, and we've been talking about it, right? We've had lots of discussions about COVID um, over the last few months and the vaccine over the last few months. We have the conversations in our personal lives as well outside of this. And so I'm really happy that we have this chance. And so we all have questions for you, Rena,
Mhm.
and um, and I'm sure if there's any of the listeners, please come through with your questions. Um, so Kiki, do you want to shoot? Did you have anything? Did you have a question ready for our fine guest here?
Um, if one of you guys can go, I'm just having a little bit of technical difficulties on my end here. Like I can hear you, but I can't see anything.
Well, you know what?
So
I think
just
then
give me a quick second here.
I think we'll just use this time then.
Hmm.
Do you want to just introduce yourself, Rena, to the audience?
Sure. So, hello, everybody. Like Tim said, I am a medical doctor. My specialty is psychiatry. I've spent a lot of years in health and wellness. So, my main area of focus and practice up till now has been pediatric obesity. So, secondary prevention, some primary prevention, but healthy lifestyle living habits, not the scale so much as how we are living. I've just pivoted to a private practice, which I'm doing alongside my pediatric work, which is focused for women on love, relationships, sexuality, that kind of thing. And that's a relatively new thing for me as well. My first degree of the many degrees I accumulated and 13 years of training is in microbiology. So I have a four-year degree in that. And so, you know, I was learning about this pandemic coming when I was an undergrad, and here it is now. And it's just changed everything about the way we live,
100%.
everything about the way I practice medicine. In some ways, it's made me a lot better. In other ways, it's been hard, as we all know. And it's really important to me having that, you know, microbiology background, and also the humanistic aspects of the work that I do, which is really about people and emotions and thinking and relationships, about, you know, kind of how we're navigating this, you know, as the various communities that we belong to.
And just as an aside, I found out, and I didn't know this, I found out that you're Trinidadian.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
On the island, came to Winnipeg for school. In those days, that's where Manitoba, I think, and Saskatchewan were taking foreign students, and so they ended up in Winnipeg, and I was born there. But spent most of my summers in Trinidad with my family there, and it's obviously a very embedded part of who I am.
Nice.
Who my parents are, and
so are we going to get to hear you do the accent?
I can't embarrass my family.
All right, then. So I won't ask you about whining either. Then.
No, well, I mean, I feel like that's just you
just know, yeah.
It's just part of it's given.
Just a given. Oh, now Kiki, do we know where Danny went?
I'm not too sure. To be honest, I can't see you guys, so I'm not too sure what's going on. I can hear you loud and clear. Can you see me? Okay.
I can see you. I can see
Awesome.
Dr. Rena. Rena, can you see us?
I can see you guys. Yeah.
Perfect.
Alrighty,
yeah,
then.
I can't see you guys, so I don't know if I'll be able to see like questions and stuff like that. But I can definitely hear you. But Rena, there's one thing you mentioned in your introduction there. You said during your undergrad, you guys kind of discussed pandemics. What you studied during your undergrad and now actually living through a pandemic, does it sort of line up with what you were taught in school or what you guys discussed back then, or is it just completely different from what you learned or discussed when you were back in university?
It's somewhat, you know, memories at the same time. It's young at that point, maybe 18. But we know that these things show themselves up every 100 years or so.
Right.
It. I thought, and I think they thought then it was going to be an influenza type, you know, virus, and it's turned out to be a coronavirus. So that was a bit of a surprise, but we knew this was coming. I mean, I, as a teenager, knew this was coming. So I'm assuming, you know, all the political leaders and heads of state, etc., knew that this was coming, and so. In the beginning, it looked like we were all scrambling with our pants down about how to get together and get it together. And we had previews from things like H1N1 and SARS, and all of that. Like, is this the big one? But, you know, this is the big one, at least the big one we know of right now. So, you know, it was surprising to me how unprepared we all looked. And when I say we, I'm looking at our neighbor to the south there a little bit too, who funded a lot of their pandemic preparedness. Obama talked about it, and you know, a smart, visionary type man, and he knew how to project into the future that something was coming. But in these last years before this now president, things were stripped bare, to my understanding, and and we really paid for it, right? And that
Mhm.
uncertainty and that elements of denial and that, oh, this is just the flu and it's no big deal, has undone us as far as the amount of misinformation and hesitancy that's actually, circulating from that lack of cohesive stance and that lack of preparedness that they could have done so differently.
Right.
Right. I remember H1N1, as I've talked about before. I'm a government employee, and there's some preparedness that was being done for policing for H1N1 back in 2009 and into 2010, and I just remember all the PPE that was being sent, and we were a computer warehouse, and they were like, yeah, great for your computers, but we need to store a whole bunch of PPE, hand sanitizing, and all these things, and we were really ready, and then there was a vaccine, and then whoop, and it wasn't as big of an issue as they thought it
Yeah.
was, and the exact same thing. So
Right?
it looks like there was a lot of preparation from the government level,
Mhm.
at least for the police, because again, that front line doesn't stop.
Right.
So it was taken seriously at that, but again, in the States, it was a completely different approach. Completely different approach. You
Yeah, and
know.
I think when you look at the preparedness sort of at the ground level, AHS certainly had stock leading into this guy as well, H1N1. There was a stockpile, that was put together. But I mean, how do you really project when it's a pandemic, right? And then when
Right.
you
Right.
talk about preparedness, you're talking about the highest levels of government, especially in the US, where they are then going to mobilize in a very uniform way. And I don't know that given the situation at the time, the political climate at the time, that was
Hmm.
the situation, right? It was, and we were dealing with a situation where we weren't sure how bad this thing was, and then
Mhm.
we started to get the news coming in from Italy, and the Italian physicians, the Italian healthcare
Right.
workers, about just how bad this thing was, and that this was no flu. And they had anesthesiologists that were young women that were intubated because they had gotten a massive viral load from taking care of patients, and then themselves fell sick. And so we knew, and thank God for those guys. Like, thank God
Right.
they sounded an alarm that set the rest of the world into a spin, because all of a sudden, this wasn't just, oh, this person's, COVID positive, we're going to isolate them and, somewhere and contain them and it's fine. We
Hmm.
Right.
started to see how quickly it was starting to spread.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's so aggressive and easily that it was able to be spread is what kind of set things apart compared to the previous fears of pandemics in the past. Like this one was.
Well, and original COVID. So, the first COVID,
Yes,
basically.
Before the
the first
variant.
COVID. I
Yeah.
don't like how you said that.
Original
The
COVID.
first
First
COVID. Yeah.
COVID.
COVID that we all got introduced to sometime,
Mhm.
last year. This new guy, Delta, it has nothing on Delta. Delta,
Right.
had secret type papers that got released saying that it's as virulent as as chicken pox. Chicken pox is bloody contagious. So if
Oh,
Yes.
I remember.
it's as chicken pox, I mean, it's gonna rip through people, right? Like, that's what it's gonna.
Mhm. So what does make the Delta variant so, like, what part of its makeup makes it so much more transmissible than the first COVID, as you described? Like, is it like a protein marker, or like, yeah,
I
what
think
makes it
my understanding is that it's multiple protein mutations, and especially
okay?
on the spike protein or the spike
The spike
protein.
protein.
It's now able to be taken into the body, and how quickly it's able to be taken into the body, what the viral load is. Um, I was just looking and reading when they looked at vaccinated people with some of the other variants, they weren't carrying as much virus, but it looks like with this one, we are carrying as much virus as though you were unvaccinated in your tissues and your nose and your throat and so on. So
Wow.
I just a more transmissible kind of a guy. And because of those multiple mutations, right? So coronavirus is a virus that will mutate, maybe not as frequently as influenza, but it mutates quite a bit. And every mutation in every body around everywhere, some of them are good mutations and it works, and some of them aren't. And when they're really good mutations, like what we saw with this particular variant, which originated out of India, like that's why we're seeing it. Every time a virus mutates into something else, it wants to be better than it was before.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily want to kill the host, because that's kind of beside the point of what viruses want. They want to infect and then they want to transmit, right? You're no good to them dead, but that is a byproduct of what happens with viruses sometimes. But this guy is just a really good spreader.
So then, do you think like the Delta variant is eventually, or variants to come? Like, I hope that we don't see too many down the road, but do you think that eventually these variants are just going to become so resistant to the current vaccines that we have in place?
So what is happening right now, I know with Pfizer, is that they are adapting the vaccine to the variant. So right now, real time, they're trialing out modifications to it. So they're not just, we had the original one, and we've basically piloted that guy out, but they're not sitting on their laurels right now, because there's gamma, there's all kinds of Greek letters that are already here. We just don't know what their significance is. So what one is going to take hold next? Is it going to be trouble? When a virus has all of these different variants, the one that does it the best is the one that becomes dominant, right? So that's why we Delta become the dominant strain. The last wave that we were in was Alpha. And it was making Alpha look like
it's just crazy how quickly that these variants are, kind of becoming present within like our communities. It's kind of scary. Like how long ago was our second wave or third wave, would you say? A few months ago, a couple of months ago, before summer started?
Mayish kind of start to come down, like come to a close. Mayish beginning. It's not been that long, 2 months, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, it's really 2-ish months. So every pandemic in general has waves. The last big one we had was 1918, right? Spanish influenza, the big guy then, and it really only had 2 or 3 big waves before it started to like ripple out. But we now at this point, because this thing has mutated the way that it has, are looking at a 4th wave. And the really hard part about this is because we can all be vaccinated. Say we've reached a really high level of vaccination in Canada. There are a lot of countries around the world that don't have access to the vaccine the way that and they're just sitting for mutations. They're just sitting down. So it's not just on us to vaccinate us, it's on us to vaccinate everybody. The whole world needs to reach herd immunity for this to actually stop, right? So
and that's kind of scary to think, when you say the entire world, kind of has to come together and get vaccinated, because like you said, for countries or different communities that don't have access to these vaccines, it's like, when are we actually gonna see like the end of the road with this thing, right? Because it's like, if
there will be an end. We just have to get to the point where we reach herd immunity, right? And the tricky thing has been natural immunity. It's been varying how long it lasts. It looks like last I read, it was maybe 6 or 8 months. And if you had COVID and then you got one vaccine, you were really protected. If you got 2 vaccines, you were super duper protected. So there is an
now they're talking about having 3.
Yes, talking about a boost, right? So and the boost might be one of the souped up virus vaccines, right? So one of the variant, kind of modified vaccines now that they may boost us with. The guys that were done in January, a lot of healthcare, those guys, maybe it's time now. It's been 6-8 months. Like maybe it's time for them to get boosted too. But really what we need is our population who's unvaccinated to be vaccinated.
Yes.
Right now, Delta, the way that it is very much affecting negatively the unvaccinated population.
Yeah.
And we know that if you have both shots of Pfizer or Moderna or, AstraZeneca, you are very, very protected from bad outcomes from this virus. And so, it leaves a whole bunch of people that are unvaccinated, completely unprotected. And now that we've apparently decided that it's a good idea to remove every public health measure we ever had, there's nothing barricading this thing from spreading like wildfire. It is super transmissible, right? It is just a super spreading kind of a guy. And so really want to do is get our unvaccinated people vaccinated as soon as possible, because not only does it protect your life, it protects everybody else
people
that
around you.
Herd immunity, and you are less likely to have a terrible outcome. Other, like, unless you there are breakthroughs. There are evidence that you can still get COVID when you are vaccinated, but a really, really bad outcome is much less likely.
I just have a question. So you mentioned Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca, and we had a discussion on one of our previous shows about the different vaccines. So Pfizer and Moderna, they're both mRNA vaccines, opposed to AstraZeneca. My question is, if you do know this, when you do get vaccinated or when you're becoming fully vaccinated, like I know some people who have what they've been calling a cocktail. So, for instance, let's say their first vaccine was AstraZeneca, and then they were able to get Pfizer or Moderna. What's the protection looking like? Like, let's say, like for instance, I've been vaccinated, so I got both Pfizer shots. But let's say someone like me who's got both Pfizer vaccines, and then someone who got a cocktail like AstraZeneca and Pfizer, for instance, like what is the efficiency looking like between those two situations? Like,
the literature in a little while, but when we were looking at the very beginning, because AstraZeneca got taken up basically by Gen X, right? And then they were all like, oh, maybe we should be using the mRNA vaccines. And so if you've gotten one shot of AZ, you potentially were going to get your second shot of some of the other guys. So at that time when I was looking, and this isn't even like my field of practice, but because it's so, all around me,
relevant, yeah.
I'm in the literature anyways. I was looking, and there was one Spanish study where they had done AZ, I believe, first, and then Pfizer second, and the cocktail was excellent for the immune response. And so, I mean, when you think about the base of what these vaccines are supposed to be doing, they're creating an immune response to this virus enough that your body recognizes it the next time it shows up and like just pounds it, right? And so all of them, whether it's J&J, AZ, what all of them, that's their job, right? And the way that they're created were just different mechanisms of creation, basically the vectors for AstraZeneca
versus the mRNA.
Yeah, versus the mRNA, which is newer technology for us in creation, but old, like 40 years to get to this point. And what a miracle that it was there and ready to go, based on other things that had happened in the past around SARS and, things that have happened almost serendipitously for us to be at this point where we're like, we have the technology to do this, and we have the technology when everybody's eyes were on creating this virus vaccine to do it properly and to do it quickly. And so the job of all of them is to do the same thing. And technically, if you're, got this guy giving you a boost here and you got a different guy giving you a boost, what has been shown and what we've seen is that the immune response is good.
Okay.
So my neighbor, who's a pharmacist, we had the talk, and I was trying to get him on well tonight, but didn't get him. But he was the first one that told me that you could stack the different the different brands of vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he explained it, because my initial question was, um, because I'm on a biologic for my eczema,
Right.
and they say you shouldn't take live vaccines um, if you are on this biologic. And so he explained to me that they use mRNA to kind of talk to your DNA,
Mm-hmm.
and it basically he said it's like adding in a couple pages to an already existing encyclopedia. That's how he explained it.
Right, right. So live attenuated vaccines, we don't have a lot of them kicking around. If I'm jogging my memory, polio, I believe, had a live attenuated aspect to it. And people lined up to take that sucker. That was virus that was like half dead, basically, right? And they were like, just give that to me because polio was so devastating. If polio was happening today, I don't really know what people would be doing right now. Maybe like anti-polio vaccine. Like the backlash of this, the anti-vaccine piece of things has really changed how these vaccines, how we thought they were going to be taken up, right? When we were all basically panicking a year and a bit ago. But the mRNA, is it's not something that can be taken into your DNA. It's a one-way street. It's a copy. It creates and it goes in one direction. Once the body's done with the T cells and the B cells, and the immunologist guys know better than me all the steps that goes through. But once it's done, the thing is gone. It's not. It doesn't stay in your system. You create the immune response. You get a nice, good, robust immune response. You back that up a number of weeks later.
Do it again. Yeah.
And you get another really good response, and then boom, you've got really good protection. And the way that vaccines work, right? So any medication that you have, it might cure you of something, it might prevent something from happening, or it might make something
Just
bad
lessen.
less, right?
Right.
So these vaccines, they prevent you from getting it potentially, and they make the bad stuff much less. And so that's where we have gone completely right with this, right? So it's not 100% guarantee that you're not going to get COVID. You could still very much get COVID and be asymptomatic and strolling around, but or like mildly symptomatic, but you're probably not going to die. Not with Delta, not where we're at right now in this pandemic. And
they said that the numbers for people who are vaccinated and the Delta variant, like there's literally no deaths with people who have been fully vaccinated with the Delta variant.
It varies between studies. So I've seen anywhere from 75 to 100% like protection, but that's pretty darn good, right? Like it's pretty good. And when they look at efficacy with some vaccines, they're really looking at in like a lab type of a setting. If we had like perfect conditions, how many people would be the reduction of this particular illness, and effectiveness has been also really good. So that's like real world. This is actually happening. How are people actually doing with this, right? And we had a pretty good test scenario in Israel because so many people got vaccinated. They struck a deal with Pfizer. They used that population for research, and they were vaccinated pretty quickly. And so a lot of the data that we do have for Pfizer is from Israel and AstraZeneca with Great Britain and how it rolled things out. And so we kind of know what it's doing in the real world. And when you think about it, how many medications do you get to roll out to a population, know what the adverse effects are, know what any of the side effects are, know whether it's effective? I mean, we're talking probably well over 1 billion. Who knows how many people now are vaccinated on the planet, right? So like it's huge. And the studies that they did when they were looking at the vaccines themselves, 30,000 people, big, huge populations for testing out a medication. So this wasn't untested. It wasn't too fast. When you talk about all the brilliant minds on the planet actually turning their heads to do this because life and death are, in the balance, and we didn't know how bad that was going to be. What we've done here is amazing, the technology and the access to science that we have. I mean, it's truly amazing. I think before this, the mumps vaccine was the fastest we'd ever produced, and that was 4 years. So it is,
It had already ravaged how many people?
exactly,
Yeah.
right?
So I was actually talking to a friend of mine, and he said something so interesting. He's like, this is the first time in history that science literally got ahead of it, first devastating a good portion of communities and of countries, and then they figured it out. Like, they figured out while it was happening. That in and of itself worries people, though.
Yeah.
But it's just like, okay, now I'm going to take a vaccine. I'm going to grow another arm in a couple of years. But like you were saying earlier, this isn't built off of nothing. This is built off of a lot of years of research and vaccinations and other vaccines that work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
the resources.
Right, exactly. A lot of mRNA work that was done in the past, a lot of, well, almost like previews with SARS and I believe MERS as well, those situations. And so we had some trial runs, and they were creating vaccines for this, and with SARS and all of that, and it just didn't take off, thank God. But it didn't take off, and that's why they stopped. Right, they were like, well, I guess we don't need this anymore.
Yes, we are.
Technology remains. And then we're like, oh dear, I guess we need this now. Right. Like, and it was there, and like that's what I don't know, and I don't even fully grasp it. And I did micro, like, the miracle that this is, that we are able to mobilize this way, is a beautiful thing. And we talk about, I taught cross-cultural psychiatry for a while when I, before, to the residents, and that's very much about different cultures and how you interact with different cultures within medicine, and sort of the systemic mistrust, institutional mistrust of particular groups, right? Particular ethnic groups. And so the mistrust is, historically warranted, right?
Yeah.
But and there is things that create like inequality and disparity, but this shouldn't be one of them, right? This, you should be cutting your nose off to spite your face. If you have access to this vaccine and you're in a racialized community, you should be like at least knocking that variable out, right? And so, but the mistrust is, historically, we know why it's there.
Yeah.
And it's not
historically embedded.
Absolutely. And so
now, can I jump in? Sorry. Like, the thing about it is, so like we were talking about the Tuskegee syphilis study. Right. Now, one of the issues there is they found the cure and didn't administer the vaccine, and sorry, not the vaccine. They didn't administer penicillin to all these people. Basically, if the past is repeating itself, they wouldn't be offering the vaccine to these communities. That's the past repeating itself.
That's right. And that's a situation in which they had a cure, right? But they wanted to see the progression of syphilis without impediment, all the way to neurosyphilis and to a terrible, horrific death, because there comes a point in syphilis that you can no longer treat cure. And it is one of the most sickening episodes in the history of health and medicine and healthcare that I know of. And these were sharecroppers in the South. They were poor. They didn't necessarily have all of the education and the ability to understand what else was going on in the world. They kept them purposefully ignorant. It is horrific to me. And because of that, and because of, my own desire, to become a physician and to serve humanity, we can't ever let our racialized communities experience something where they're in the dark like that, and they're abused, in my opinion, like that, and they are exploited like that. And so when there's something here that levels that playing field, which this vaccine does, and it is safe, and I have taken 2 of them, I would take 20 more if that's what was necessary. I have no fear, because I know I trust in the science and the medicine, and I understand it. And I think it's really important that we, in our communities and as one community, you know, whether we group ourselves as West Indian or East Indian or African or Canadian or whatever we group ourselves, you know, and maybe we group ourselves in all of those communities, that we don't put ourselves at a disadvantage when there's something life-saving like this. And when our own community is saying and standing up, and our physicians of color are saying, look, it's safe, and I've done it, and I would give it to my kids, and I would take another 20 of them if it was necessary. Because I think, you know, because things like Tuskegee happened, we are at a, you know, a disadvantage when it comes to trust. And I think it's up to us in our community to be able to say, we need to understand the science. We need to trust in the expertise. We need to trust in, you know, physicians. I'm not an infectious disease specialist. I know some amazing infectious disease specialists, intensive care physicians, frontline workers. We need to trust in those guys, that where we're being led is by expertise, by science, by research. And that's who we should be listening to, not, you know, Aunt Fanny on Facebook who, you know, posted this video, and now, you know, 100 people, just because it spread like wildfire, are now not taking this vaccine because of whatever, you know, conspiracy theory. You know, this is in a situation like this, opinion and expertise are not the same thing. And you know, you need to lead with expertise, but you need to trust in your sources and who's credible in order to be able to do that, right? So,
and you know what, I do agree. You know, I was having a talk with my friend, and and it was funny. He was just like, the science that's involved here, like, you know, there's people that are talking about it with opinions and conspiracy, but the science is so deep. You know what I mean? Like, most of us, we use our phones. We have no clue what's going on. Do you know what I mean? We use our computers, and we have no clue what's going on. Like, how could we intelligently talk about something like this when the science is like way out of this world almost?
Specialists sitting in my spot, they would be talking about exactly what mutations. They'd have names for them. They'd be like, this one did this, and then it did that, and then we did this. Like, it's so intricate, right? I don't have that science at my fingertips. The ID does, but immunology and those guys do. But it is absolutely microbiology, microscopic. You know what I mean? Like like, it's minute what we have done and created and sequenced and fragmented and made vaccine out of.
All those words, they're like triggers, but good triggers. It just took me back to genetics 400.
You know, and you know, so you know, doing all the micro and then going into medicine and like living it, like, progression of that. I can't tell you, and I'm sure, you know, all of us have glimpses of it, but like, I'm not kidding when I say that this is an absolute serendipitous, synchronous miracle that we were able to take care of our people the way that we have. 100 years ago, what would have happened? What would be happening right now? Right?
Yeah.
Public health measures at its rudimentary sort of basics is keep apart and put a mask on. They did that in 1918, you know, but we are one step ahead, or 20 steps ahead, a million steps ahead with this vaccine.
With the vaccine and technology and resources. And, you know, even though, you know, on social media and stuff, there's a lot of conspiracy and stuff that's being shared, there is some positive to it as well, just because everything is so instant. And for those who are, you know, seeking the truth and seeking the expertise, like you mentioned, it is nice that due to technology, we're able to obtain that information for those who are seeking the right information.
Absolutely. If you have people in healthcare or medicine or, you know, nursing, the respiratory therapists, we don't talk enough about those guys, the respiratory therapists and what they've done during this pandemic, right? To keep people alive on ventilators and in ICU and all of the things. If you have those people in your life, talk to those people. They've spent time, you know, studying, learning, perfecting what they're doing. I wouldn't propose to tell you how to rebuild an engine. You shouldn't come to me for that. But
Yeah.
for what I do, I'm an expert. And
Yes.
and there are guys that are more expert than I am when it comes to this virus. And those are the people you need to be listening to. And you need the relationship. You need the trust in the relationship, right? And so there is all the conspiracy theories and,
Yeah.
oh, it's going to do this and, oh, it's going to do that. But at the end of the day, what has happened now, what we're seeing is this has now become a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And
Yeah.
the worst consequences are going to be for the unvaccinated. And so we really, really need a lot of those guys, if they're hesitant or they're not sure, to reconsider, to really reconsider. And we do that by education. We do that, by conversation. There's a group you're just never going to reach, and that's okay. But for the guys that are more, movable middle
On the
and
fence.
the worried, right? They I don't want to see those guys hesitate. We're seeing it in the US right now. They're on their way to ICU. They're about to get vented, like all the stuff, and if they've got any ability to say it, they're like, can I take the vaccine now?
Yeah. Yeah. And
I've seen that.
it's funny that you said that, because I literally had that conversation with someone at work today, and the thing is, for my age group too, with the variants, I'm 27, and you're seeing a lot of unvaccinated, millennials and stuff who are going to the ICU or who are dying from the virus because they're not vaccinated. And it's really scary, because initially, you mentioned first COVID, when, about a year and a half ago, when we were introduced to COVID, everyone was saying, oh, it's just affecting, the older demographic. But now that's not the case. Now that the virus is mutating the way that it is, we're seeing that it's affecting younger people who are healthy.
That's who's not vaccinated, right? So
Yeah.
it's to be who it rips through now.
Right. And the interesting thing about that too is the way, I guess you could say, they initiated the vaccine rollout. Because here, they got the older demographic vaccinated. And I know, when some of the variants came about and I was having discussions with different people, they were saying maybe it should have been a little more staggered. And that, so that they were getting like a handful of like the older demographic and the younger demographic getting vaccinated kind of around the same time, so that it wouldn't have affected the younger people as much while they were waiting to get vaccinated. So I thought that was an interesting discussion as well that was brought up.
Well, and you think about it too, strategically, I assume that they were trying to vaccinate highest risk population. I
Right.
know they were. But strategically, should they have also been vaccinating key demographics of our workforce? Should they have been doing other parts of the younger population? They held off on the rest of medicine, besides like the super duper front line, for a really long time.
Yeah.
With all of us functioning, the healthcare system doesn't work really well, right? And so there was only so much vaccine for a period of time, but we didn't have enough, and they had to give it to where this thing was hitting hardest. Now that has shifted. Now I don't know if it's too soon to tell, once Delta starts to rip through the unvaccinated, if it's going to translate into a lot of hospitalizations and ICU and death. I don't know that yet. I don't have a reason to believe that it's not going to have an impact, but I don't know how much of an impact.
To what extent?
The millennials that you're talking, the younger millennials that you're talking about, and Gen Z and those guys, they need to get vaccinated. They need to get vaccinated, because there's just no guarantees that Delta does this and then we get, I don't know what, Omega.
Yeah.
we're some other monster nightmare, right?
And then every few months, it's like we're seeing a new variant. So who knows, what is to come. And it'd be unfortunate if people kind of just waiting around to see what's next, and we don't want it to be too late. So
I mean, the clear message to me watching what's happening right now is the way to stop this pandemic is to be vaccinated. That's how we stop it, right? Because the higher the vaccine rate, double vaccinated, the lower the infection rate. Eventually, this thing gets stopped in its tracks because it's got no one else to infect. Every time it tries to infect you, it's not working because you're already immune.
Right.
It can't go anywhere else. It's just like, okay, I guess I'm done, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we want. I don't know if we're going to have like, you know, years of coronavirus. They don't usually do that. I don't know. But what I do know is to stop the sucker in its tracks now, we need to be vaccinated. And, you know, that is the tragedy for me, watching kind of how this has unfolded and how much hesitancy there has been, where I don't know 30 or 40 years ago, without social media and other things and the ability to transmit basic propaganda, if we would be in the situation we're in right now. And so that's been the hardest thing to watch. I just saw, I don't know how old, 31, some in 30s, 8-month pregnant woman, Jessie O'Shea shared it, died of COVID, 8 months pregnant, and that age. And there's some reason, I don't know, because they didn't logistically share all of the details, but she couldn't get the vaccine for some reason. And she died. There was another, you know, story today, a 39-year-old didn't get the vaccine. So, you know, it's affecting young people.
Right. So my question to you is, because, you know, there are going to be, I guess you can say, exceptions, or there are going to be individuals who are going to say, you know, I can't get vaccinated due to some sort of medical condition. Do you think, like, I don't want to say that it's up to the rest of us who can, because it's like you don't necessarily want that sort of pressure. But then you even think about kids who are under 12 who don't have a vaccine yet, who are going back to school in the fall. Do you think it's up to those individuals who can get the vaccine and don't have like any sort of like medical barriers or age barriers to get vaccinated,
So, you know,
to help those groups?
There's going to be a group of people who are allergic to the components of the vaccine, right? So that they can't get it. There's going to be a group of people who their immune systems won't mount the immune response that's necessary to get the benefit from the vaccine, depending on whatever condition that they have. So they're not going to be immune the same way we would be potentially, or somebody would be, if they had a fully competent immune system.
Would you see that in like cancer patients, for instance?
Potentially,
depending on what sort of treatment they're getting.
Yeah, if you're immunosuppressed and you're not maybe able to mount that kind of response, you're going to see it now. We don't have approval for the kids under 12, and while, you know, the theory has been that we're seeing milder disease in kids under 12, and I believe that to be true, we're also seeing long haul COVID in children. So, you know, ages 2 to 16, we're seeing long haul COVID, so disability from COVID that lasts who knows how long, because we're not far enough out from the pandemic to know that yet. And that's what I saw today out of Florida, which is a gong show free-for-all, is that they've got more kids admitted to hospital than they have at any other point during this pandemic. I mean, lots of admitted, right? Admitted to a hospital because you can't breathe from COVID when you're, you know, under 16 is a very bad thing, right?
Yes.
And so we are playing a little bit of Russian roulette, throwing these kids back into school with this variant and thinking it's just, kids get it, it's mild, it's no big deal. I don't know that. I am not on that, and I don't think the CDC is clear on that. I don't think any of the large groups that are you know, in governance are clear of that. But for some reason, our province seems to think that it's clear on that, and it's quite the Russian roulette right now with that, is my opinion.
Yep. No, I think that's an excellent way to describe it, because that's what it feels like.
It does. Too fast, too soon. That is the definition of trauma. And they have just gone and traumatized us again.
Wow,
right?
I like that. Too fast, too soon. The definition of trauma.
And so we are now trying to adjust to sending our children, I have 2, 11 and 6, under 12, into a situation where I'm not 100% sure. I'm not as convinced as public health is here. And contrary to basically the rest of the world, that this is a good idea. And so, you know, we need to be vigilant, and we need to speak up, and we need to speak up, you know, again, as our communities, to say that we, you know, we are not comfortable. We feel uncomfortable, right? And trust is the thing. And this is a good example of trust, right? Do we have? So, you know, we are going to see people that are younger getting infected, and by sheer percentages, we're going to see bad outcomes because we just are. And so, you know, it's the antidote to that is vaccine, but not if none of the vaccine is approved for under 12.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So, and we probably could. I mean, it's probably safe enough, but we need the approval. That's why we have the checks and balances and all the stops that we have to make sure. And this is premature. It's premature.
And that's just the reality.
Yeah.
So Tim, is Tim
So,
still there? Like
I
I
don't know
said,
can you guys hear me? I still can't hear you. But you
okay,
guys can hear me?
we can hear you.
Cool. So I'm just gonna ask a couple questions that have been put in our group.
Okay.
So Greg Davis, I don't know if you guys answered this already. Can you talk about the differences between the various vaccines that are out now?
So, I mean, right now, the two that we are using are Pfizer and Moderna, and they're the mRNA vaccines. So AstraZeneca, they decided it wasn't as good as those guys. And so those are the guys that we're using right now, Moderna and Pfizer. Comparable, like to compare them, they're in my mind equal. I would take either. They're the same type of technology. They are excellent vaccines at preventing, like I said, bad outcomes, ICU and death. You know, so either of those, I would put my trust in either of those. I'm double Pfizered. But if I had to boost with Moderna, I would do that. There's no hesitation with either of those vaccines. And they're very similar technology, just obviously different companies that you know won the race to create the vaccines that work.
Okay, so again, I can't hear you, so kind of let me know when you're done. So the next question that that Greg has is, with the history of the vaccine development and where the Black community was used as unknowing test subjects, what are some of the steps that one can take to move past the distrust and that currently exists?
I understand that. I mean, I was just listening to a podcast yesterday. They're talking about how a lot of the polio vaccine was actually tested on the Black population in the United States, right? So the African American population. And, you know, that sense and feeling of being in some ways, and it's not a great way to put it, but like a guinea pig, right? Like a test subject. And that hasn't happened in this scenario. That hasn't happened in this situation. There are a lot of checks and balances, again, in order to test in any country, including places like Africa. And, you know, we aren't doing that. I think we've come far enough to understand that it's not okay. And so we're basically, all of us, you know, taking up this vaccine, whether I'm, you know, my own ethnic background, which is Indian, or you're, you know, Caucasian white, you're Black, we're all Indigenous, we're all taking this all at the same time. And so no one group, again, has been exploited, you know, as a test against their will. And that is the biggest difference, I think, when we talk about what happened with things like Tuskegee, even testing polio. Consent, right? And so we really
like that.
understand that we are saying yes with full information and full knowledge. And the way you do that is you get the information from a trusted talk to trusted. So you fill in your knowledge that you know, and then you consent to it. You agree to it of your own will, your own volition, your own desire. That is the difference from what happened then, which, like I said, is horrific and horrendous in the past, things that have happened, and what is happening now. You know, I spent a lot of time studying the Holocaust, and some of the medical things that happened, you know, particularly to the Jewish population, but also to other populations that the Nazis had interned in camps, and consent. Anything that happened in those situations happened, you know, in things like Tuskegee, happened in, you know, residential schools. You have to be in agreement, and you have to trust, and you have to have a relationship. And that's how you move past the past. We don't forget it. We don't ever forget it, but we understand that we are in a different place now. And we have people like me who were able to, you know, come from a family of immigrants from the island, came here, you know, brought their daughter up and their son to become physicians. And we are examples of moving forward and
advocacy,
the science, and the ability to now make those decisions and help others make those decisions from an informed place with consent.
Did you guys ask the question about Greg had another one.
So we're hitting close to our hour mark. I don't know if anyone else has any questions, or Kiki, do you have any?
No.
They were having a great conversation. The bio nerds. No offense.
That's okay.
That was great.
That's okay.
That was awesome. But now Greg mentioned something about Greg Davis. Thanks for being here. I haven't heard this one. That Europe and North America infecting Africa, or letting people infecting Africa with AIDS to test vaccinations on them. I haven't heard that, but
no.
If you want to address,
that's, you know, I came of age and of age in medicine in the era of HIV and AIDS and the devastating disease that it was, and you know, it isn't to the degree that it was then. Then it was just, it's a death sentence. And you know, the natural progression of how, like all, you know, viruses that take hold, or, you know, many of them, you know, came from animal into human, how that happened. And then the virus took hold for what it wanted to do, right? It's good at what it does. So, you know, it's an immunodeficiency virus. That's exactly what it does. It knocks out your immune system. It wasn't any conspiracy of infection between North America or Europe, because North America and Europe had quite the hit, especially within the, you know,
homosexual populations.
Gay men, bisexual men in particular, they were disseminated in lots of different ways and in tragic ways. And so it's just not that diabolical. And you know, I'm from Winnipeg, and one of our researchers there, Dr. Frank Plummer, is he's died now, world-renowned HIV specialists and researchers. And what he found, he went to Africa and he found women that were, you know, in the business, sex workers, and they had parts of their, they were immune to the virus in ways, and he was able to take that, working with those women, and translate it into some of the treatments and technology that we have now, that have turned the tide for HIV/AIDS.
I did not know that.
He was an amazing man. He taught me. He, you know, one of my friends who's an infectious disease specialist in Vancouver, Mel, she did her PhD with him. And those women, those African women, were the key to moving us towards cure, towards living with this disease, towards suppressing this virus. So nobody infected Africa. I mean, the theory, as I remember it, is, you know, it was Monkey was the zoonotic, sort of the host, the initial, and then it went however it went. However, this one went to this, COVID from whatever bat thing to like us. It's just how it works when, with viruses. But part of the treatment and figuring out, how to not die from this thing actually did come from Africa. And so, there's a story you can tell, that puts you in a place of being a victim. And that's, in my knowledge, experience, and the science, not what happened with HIV/AIDS. But there's a place of empowerment and strength that Black women in particular played to move us to a point where HIV/AIDS is no longer a death sentence. And that's the story I want to hear about.
Big up to the Black woman. That is awesome. I did not know that. Wow. So Greg, thank you for asking that question. Really, thank you for asking that question, because that led to some knowledge. I'm sure there's some other people here that didn't know that. Wow.
Alrighty.
I'm just thinking there was something.
You had another question before we
wrap
up?
I think we're good.
Think we're good?
I think we're good in regards to that. If there's anybody else, now's the chance.
Yes, now is the chance. If there's any last questions that you have for our expert Rena here. I can actually see you guys now, so that's why I was like,
you're
going
good now?
through some of the comments and stuff. But yeah.
Now, I'm hearing this clicking. I was typing earlier, and I'm hearing this clicking still, which is.
Yeah, I was wondering who, again, because I couldn't see anything. So I thought it was you, Tim. I'll be honest. I thought it was you.
I'm gonna stop you typing. I'm on mute. I am not typing. So.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, I'm not seeing any other comments or questions here. So Tim, would you like to wrap things up?
Well, I could, but it really depends. If sometimes I call her Dr. Love. I've just opened the door on our relationship a little bit. Okay. There's a question. Where can we get more information on the role African women played in fighting AIDS?
Look up Dr. Frank Plummer. So Frank.
Dr. Frank Plummer. I'm gonna write that down.
And look up his work.
Literally write that down.
And see the amazing things that happened. And I'm working now, like I said earlier, with women and human sexuality and love relationships, all that stuff. But these women who were working, and managed to develop this immunity, those women were sex workers, and we owe them a tremendous amount. We owe Dr. Plummer too. We owe his brilliant, brilliant mind, but we owe those women a tremendous amount. And so, I just want to say the dignity of that and the respect I have.
Thank you. Now, like I was saying at the you mentioned that you've moved into private practice, and I was mentioning I don't know if we said that before we went on live, but I was just saying that sometimes I sit on your virtual couch, on IG or on Facebook, and in one of our last conversations, you talked about self-abandonment and self-betrayal, and just if you could just do a little Cole's notes on some of those things, I think it's really, really important, because sometimes we can blur the line between what we think we're doing in relationships or just with the people in our lives. Could be anybody, really. But we think we're doing the right thing versus just really doing a disservice to self, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I think sometimes we get into relationships with people who I would call unavailable, who are not open and available to give us the kind of love, care, trust, respect, that we are deserving of, whether they have their own trauma that they work through, whether they're more of that sort of avoidant type attachment where they really kind of run for the hills from intimacy, whether they're not the greatest kind of people and they're exploitative and got that sort of narcissistic, bent to them. Whatever the reason is, we encounter people that can't love us the way that we need to be loved. And, depending on how we were raised and the families that we were raised in, the conditions, all of that, some of us, that just makes us work a lot harder, right? We're like, okay, I will get the love from you. And when I do get a glimpse of it or a scrap of it or a crumb of it, I've won for that minute, and then it gets withdrawn again. And so you get into this cycle of chase and chase and chase. And in that process, if you stop and think about what you're doing and what you're going after, which is no prize because it can never actually meet your needs, you are abandoning yourself. You are going and trying to get something from somebody else, knowing probably on some level that it's never going to be what you want it to be. And the person that you should be giving that care and that love and that trust and that respect to is you. And in the process of chasing this unattainable, oftentimes not that good for you, sometimes abusive type of a thing, you are betraying yourself, your little self, the little self that's looking to you to finally stand up for me, love me, protect me. Don't let this whoever do this to me. Don't leave me alone while you chase this person. And when we stop and we think about what it means to love ourselves, because people throw that around, love yourself, self-love. What the hell does that mean, right? What is self-love? Self-love is boundaries. Self-love is saying that I won't let you treat me like this because I deserve to be treated like in a better way. And if you can't give that to me, then I will give that to me. And I won't let you bust my boundaries in order for me to get a scrap from you, and take and for, the transaction part of it. And so that is what self-love is. People will be like, self-love, love yourself. That all sounds great. Like, well, how do I do that? Right? It's by making promises to yourself and keeping them. It's by when people, do you wrong or harm, not giving them another 77 chances. It's respecting that when you set a limit, that you hold that limit, because lots of us grew up moving around our boundaries to please a parent so that they wouldn't be mad at us, or to make friends, or, whatever. And you have to it comes back to you and the container that you are, and how you want to define that, and who you let into that, and how you treat yourself within that container. And to not protect yourself that way, and I don't mean protect your heart and be guarded, I mean open-hearted, energetically good boundaries. That's how you love yourself, and that's how you don't self-abandon, you don't self-betray, you don't self-reject.
Okay, thank you.
My camera was overheating, sorry. But that is really huge, because I think that sometimes, especially people who come from a lot of times a Christian background, or even just anybody, like we can focus on the sacrifice part of love, and we can really betray ourselves when the other person has fully shown us they don't have what you need. Even if you've told them, hey, I need this, there's 1,000 excuses, and then you just sit there with this gaping hole. And I think that's really important, that we realize, like, no, like, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. And all the effort you're doing to earn their love, like you said, give that back to yourself. That love, you show that love to yourself by setting those boundaries.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree.
Like, when you do that, when in those little tiny ways you respect yourself by keeping your promise to yourself, not doing those things, it strengthens you, and it shows you that you're worthy. I mean, I'm worthy from the day that I was born, not because I, have this hair color, not because I'm a doctor, not because, whatever things define me or I have achieved, but I'm worthy. I'm worthy of love. I'm worthy of being loved just as I am. And I don't have to convince anybody that who I am is not enough. I'm enough, right? And if you have to convince someone, or teach them or show them like how to love you, it's so much energy that's being expended in a direction that's never going to bear the fruit you think that it should.
Now,
Right?
how do you know when but like, say if you have a partner, how do you know when somebody else's traumas are unresolved traumas are too much to deal with? How do you know? Like, is there, not that there's like a checklist, but like, what are some of those? What would you say to somebody sitting down with you and saying, "Hey, this is what I'm dealing with my partner"? Like, what's your opinion on knowing?
Where are the boundaries between how much you give to somebody if they're in a state where they've been traumatized versus, where are the limits, kind of thing? Is that what you're?
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
in lots of ways you have to set those limits with a partner. A simple thing like, I'm want to share this with you right now. Do you have the space, the time, the capacity to be able to hear what I need to share with you? If they're so traumatized from something that's happened, whether it's a post-traumatic stress type of a picture, or they're just simply, we talk about fight, flight, fawn, freeze, they're totally shut down, freeze, so they're just completely almost like, not emotionally able to give, whether it's any kind of traumatic response. We are responsible. We're not responsible for the trauma, but we're responsible for what we do to look after trying to heal from that trauma. And that's not something that you can put upon a partner to be responsible for healing you. And, that's why you have the containers, you ask for the boundaries around the space of, do you have the time and the effort to do this for me? But really, it comes down to healing those things, oftentimes professionally, maybe spiritually, getting therapy, whatever your religious background is, whether you believe in energy, all of that stuff. You do the things that are going to heal you to make you whole, so that when you come into a partnership, it's not my deficit and your deficit and how are we going to we all have wounds and trauma. It's, I'm as healed and whole as I can be. Are you as healed and whole as you can be? And can we come together, not to complete each other, but to be alongside of each other? And, it isn't a perfect world, and people get traumatized while they're in relationships, or, they've gone this far, but there's ways to go. But the willingness to do that work, the willingness to actually look after yourself, not to put it completely on your loved ones, but also recognize your loved ones are there to support you too, but there should be limits to that. Is again, healthy, respectful boundaries, right? And taking ownership. So, something bad happens, in the situation, that thing did happen to you, but your ability to deal with it, alchemize it into something else, take whatever you need to from it, leave behind what you no longer serves you. That work is on you. That work is not the responsibility necessarily of somebody who is in a relationship with you. And I think we enter into these partnerships a lot wounded, and we don't know we have the wounds, and we're unconscious of those wounds, and we act them out all over the place, and then kaboom, right? And then it's like, why didn't this work? It's like absolutely blinders on to how wounded people are, and then trying to like repair. It's like, oh, this thing happened to me, I broke up, I hate the divorce, like whatever, now I'm gonna get right into something else. They're not healed. They're no different than they were, towards the end of that last thing, and they're rushing towards another human being as though that's going to be the cure, and it's not, right? You are the cure. You are what you do for yourself. So I think making what's unconscious conscious is a really good idea. And if you don't know if you're wounded or not, and someone maybe gives you a hint that you are, going and looking after that.
That was an excellent answer. Thank you so much. Thank you. There was a question going back to COVID. So this is by Aisha. So just to be clear, the COVID vaccine has no side effects that can appear long after you've taken it. That's a pretty big question.
Okay, well, I don't have the longitudinal data. Okay, I can't see or project into the future to, you know, have absolutes. It's not black and white, but in my capacity, with my expertise and my experience right now in this moment, I do not believe that we are going to see longitudinal bad adverse reactions to this vaccine or vaccines at this time. I trust in the technology. I don't see that happening.
As also compared to what could happen right away, which is you get COVID and just die. So when you start comparing it to that, like
everything is a risk and everything is a benefit, right? And so you have leukemia and you need to get chemotherapy, and you're getting some chemotherapy. Of all the chemotherapies, all the ones I work pediatric oncology. I led the mental health team for Peds Onc at the Stollery. So I've seen all kinds of things happen to very small people and what they have to go through to fight off that cancer. The cure sometimes is worse than the disease, and the chemotherapy had horrendous side effects. But do you think they hesitated to take that, or those families hesitated to make the decision for those kids to take it? Because if they didn't,
no, they didn't.
The consequence was going to be death, most likely.
That's
and so
true.
anything, you have to weigh the risks and the benefits. The risks of these vaccines, the safety of these vaccines is amazing. The risk is small. And again, we are piloting this on 1 billion people. We are not seeing 1 billion people mutating right now, dropping like flies. Like we aren't. And we are, from the initiation of the vaccines, December, January, 7, 8, 9 months out from that now, right? Your healthy lifestyle, your habits, what you eat, how much you're exercising, how you manage your stress, longitudinally is going to have a far worse outcome if you don't take care of those things than any of these vaccines ever could. This is a quick and dirty, mount an immune response, have some memory, mount another immune response, have some memory, go about your business. There are lots of things that we do as humans that harm ourselves on the daily that these vaccines could never touch when it comes
100%.
to like launch.
100%.
Right?
Some people won't take the vaccine and they smoke cigarettes.
Yeah.
Like, sorry.
They don't move their body.
Don't exercise. Don't drink water. Yep.
Right. So those things, I would be way more worried about the long-term consequences of those things than I would ever be worried about these vaccines.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Danny's back.
Danny's back. Danny is back. Oh, maybe she's not back. Can she see us?
Nope, she frozen.
Danny, can you see us?
Hi. Sorry, I can't hear you. Like I said, I'm on a delay.
Alrighty.
So I'm assuming we're ending the night since we're at 1 hour and 20 minutes. It was a great and amazing conversation. I want to thank Dr. Reina for joining us tonight, blowing our minds with a lot of information. I want to thank the viewers with all the questions, especially Greg. Thank you, Greg, for all the questions. I don't know, maybe we'll come back another time and do a longer version of the relationship talk with Dr. Reina.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. So hopefully
I don't know how to end
she
this.
enjoyed it.
Kiki, do you want to end it?
I just want to say thank you to everybody that joined us in our pop-up tonight. Sorry about some of the technical difficulties, and it does sound like my keyboard was phantom typing throughout this whole thing. But again, Rena, thank you so much. And everybody, again, thank you for coming through. We'll be letting you know when we're going to be back here for season number 2 of Let's Be Real.
Yeah.
And everybody have a blessed night and be safe. And I'm going to say this, everybody, Tim is going to get vaccinated. I've actually made my mind up on that. A while ago, I found out some information with the medication that I take that there's no interactions. So I'm going to get vaccinated and get traveling. That's exactly my plan.
I
Okay.
can say as well, please get vaccinated. Please. That's that. If I could make one plea and ask one thing, please get vaccinated for your sake. and talk to those you trust if you're not sure.
Okay.
And talk to your local pharmacist. They're kind of the front lines of information about the vaccine. A lot of pharmacies are the ones administering the vaccines, and you can get them the same day, a lot of them, and they have a ton of information. So it does, the conversation doesn't stop here. You can go ask questions. Don't trust Instagram, Facebook. Talk to a pharmacist who deals with people all the time.
Talk to your professionals.
Talk to your family practitioner. Talk to your family doctor. And get actual information, because this is what they do, right?
Yeah.
So again, everybody, thank you so much, and have a fantastic night.
Have a good night, guys. Thanks again.
Thanks again, Dr. Rena. Dr. Love.
Have a good night, everyone.
Dr. Love's coming